Okay, I recently went to the La Marzocco Innovation Gallery tour in Oakland. La Marzocco's touring around with Mahlkonig, and they're showing off several new things. They're showing off the Strata X, the Swan grinder, which is an evolution of the S grinder, and then Mahlkonig's showing off their E80 Grind by Sync, which is the grinder that talks to the espresso machine and essentially adjusts the grind itself. And that's what we spend most of this episode talking about. And Jared and I get into just kind of riffing on automation and different perspectives on automation in the specialty coffee industry. I think it's a really interesting topic because everyone kind of has their deal breaker where this is okay, but that's going too far. And the grinder feels like a really touchy subject for a lot of people because scales is kind of a hands-off thing. Even volumetrics were a little bit of a hands-off thing. But once you have this machine that's doing this motion, we would physically grab the grinder collar, or there's this touchy-feely thing associated with adjusting a grind that I think is getting under a lot of baristas' skin. So we just kind of dive in on that. And it's really, really interesting to think about what's going to happen in the future, what's going on now, and what level of automation people are willing to accept and still see themselves as professionals, see themselves as baristas, see themselves as specialty. So super hot topic. We don't get all the way into it, but I think it's a really, really fun listen. So we're just going to cut right into it. Here is us riffing on automation and specifically the Mahlkonig E80 Grind by Sync grinder. All right.
What are we up to, bro?
I don't know. There's a million things we're up to.
Oh, we really are.
There's 1,000 things to talk about.
There's 1,000 reasons to go about my way.
There's 1,000 million reasons.
So many good songs about reasons. I don't even know where I'm at. I feel like I've been doing interviews in this room right there for like 20 hours. It's not exactly the amount of hours, but you're sitting in that room, you're having a nice conversation. I enjoy interviews. They're pretty fun. That's been what I've been doing pretty much all week. Is interviewing in specific little meetings.
Here's some softball stuff.
Dude,
softball. Could be easy
it up
to talk about since it's right before the holidays and there's a million things going on.
Softball us.
I went to that La Marzocco Innovation Gallery
I'm jealous.
tour.
Yeah, I'm gonna take some notes on that.
Take some notes on this. Write this down.
Yeah.
I saw 3 new things.
Jot this down, Lee. Okay.
First thing is the Strata X.
Neat.
Check that off. Second thing is the La Marzocco Swan grinder.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about that. And
yeah,
then
yeah.
The third thing is the Mahlkonig E80W Grind by Sync, that's the fucking one that I want to talk about.
Yeah, tell me more.
All right. So,
I wasn't there. I missed it.
So have you seen this? It's the one...
Seen concepts of it.
So it's a grind by weight grinder. It's basically the same as the E80 W.
Right.
So it's got a scale built in,
mm-hmm.
but it talks to your La Marzocco machine,
right,
and it adjusts the grind by itself.
Yeah.
So the barista dials in, and you basically set parameters. So it's like you set your mass out
mm-hmm.
and your time, and you set your extraction time.
Right.
And then as you go, the grinder just reads what's happening in the machine. So the machine and the grinder share like a cloud, or they interface together with a cloud. And
it's coming in at this and it's coming out at that, so I'm gonna make a change.
It's like, oh, you wanted 30 or 40 grams over 29 seconds, and now it's 26 seconds. So I am the grinder, and I will make an adjustment for you.
Yeah, make an assessment.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Old Gregan.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know.
I'm sure they showed it working in the place.
They showed it working, and admittedly, the dude was pretty upfront that it has some quirks still, and there's still
new products always do
it out. And everyone has like a completely different take on it. I posted something on my Instagram, and some people are like, "This is the worst. Like, it's taking the barista out of the equation." And
oh yeah, there's those folk.
Some people are saying this is perfect. I don't know. It's just an interesting thing to riff about.
Yeah, no doubt. Is the riff kind of in the context of automation and the barista, or is the riff on Because to me, I remember distinctly getting pretty passionate when I was speaking in Australia, in Sydney, because the concept of automation has kind of been talked about, right, in some capacity for a few years now. I guess we'll say 5 years it's been working on, and more, but like there's the more and less automation. There's the automation that you see at like the X barista which is only a robot arm, basically looks like this boom on the mic actually making coffee, and it can pour latte art. And there's everything in between, right? And I remember being pretty passionate. And for me, the passionate portion comes down to really mostly making sure that we keep humans and the human interaction in the equation, and less so specifically to the tools and the things that may help you, produce quality. And so, anyways, where are you finding the conversation going?
I'm curious about a couple things. So I'm curious about, well, the one argument that I feel like I want to address is people are going to actually hang on. This is I have a quote, and this is going to work. Give
go
me
get
30
the quote.
seconds.
It's probably somewhere. Guys, gals, dolls, folks, them. He's out there. You can see it in the little camera if you follow along, but if you don't, he walked away and now he's back.
Well, I think everybody knows Keys to the Shop podcast.
Sure.
Right? Chris
Shout out to
DeFario.
Mr. DeFair.
Living legend.
Mm-hmm. Autumn Leaf themselves.
He had some insightful things which sparked me to want to talk about
Was he there?
A million different things. No,
Oh.
I had posted something. I posted a reel to Instagram.
Oh, yeah.
And
love him.
He responded. I'm just going to read his response because it made me feel a lot of different things at the same time. He says, pretty handy, but we will always need the barista to provide the parameters based on how that coffee tastes best, especially given the variables of the coffee's age, which I completely agree with. He continues, every convenience is a tool that we should view as means to further engage versus disengage, which I also completely agree with. And then he says, biggest fear is that we will simply trust the machine and hear more baristas say should be good, and in doing so, unwittingly slide our standards to new but consistent lows.
Yeah.
That said, it is certainly cool tech. So I think his comment kind of captures a lot of the things that people are thinking. And I don't know who the dude was who was doing the Mahlkonig presentation, but he did address some of these things, which you don't pick up on from just the little snippet that I posted. But the barista still dials in. So you have to dial in just like you would any other grinder.
I totally agree with everything DeFario said, actually, there. The barista isn't, they're not rendered useless based on their care and engagement, and he's probably right. It is a way for us to become lazier, and that's a big portion of the fear, and that would make sense. You just come in and you don't, as the leader who passes on the information as technology is integrated more, doesn't pass on the care or the dedication or the understanding that, hey, this is really, really important, that you understand what is happening in terms of affecting the flavors and what is good and what is acceptable here. And if that doesn't happen, you're right. People come in and go, yeah, no, it's good. And here we are. Like, the numbers say it all. We've said this since like the introduction of just a scale.
Well, and that's where I want to push back on kind of a lot of people's argument at the same time, because yes, that is true. Like, Chris is right. You are right. I agree with you. Where these tools become valuable is like nobody's fucking doing that anyway.
Right.
You know what I mean?
They should be.
It's like, I actually think that if this grinder worked the way it was supposed to, and you put this setup in all of the third wave cafes that I've been frequently, that the quality would actually go up.
Right.
Because what I see is a huge variance in espresso quality. I don't get too many amazing espressos.
Sure.
Overall on my coffee travels. You know what I mean? And I was talking to Colby a little bit about this, but we've said this before, that, being a barista is just a much more common job now than it ever has been in the past in the specialty world, where it used to be, if you wanted to do this, it wasn't a popular job. There weren't a lot of places. You would be really excited about what you're doing and you would seek out these places and you would go work for them and you were really into coffee. And that's just not the case anymore.
Yeah.
There's just so many of them. And Colby used a really interesting term, and he was like, yeah, all these, most of the people in cafes now, they're third wave natives. They're specialty natives. Like how you'd have a digital native, like someone who's born with an iPhone and social media. It's
to
them, this is just coffee. This is just what coffee is. Like, so, you know, take that however you want it. But I think that's really interesting because, yeah, the problem is that people are already disengaged.
Right.
And putting this in could help make more consistency, but it doesn't solve the root core of the problem, which is
the engagement factor.
How do we get people excited about the process of making espresso and get them in tune with their palates and get them in tune with the like amazing beverage that is in front of them?
Yeah. It's funny because there's also like, there's a lot of science and evidence that says most people that get value from the work they do, right? They need to genuinely feel helpful and feel that they're helping people or helping a cause is one part. And then the other part is they need to actually feel challenged and that they're like doing something that challenges them and makes them grow. And so that's a weird impasse because I think we're kind of culturally looking to do the least amount of work, right? So that's the thing where it maybe becomes a struggle because we're not. You're at a bit of an impasse where it's like, well, what we're supposed to do is make this all easier. And so like, I don't really have to do anything to make it good. And then at the same time, what we're saying that matters so much is the engagement in the process of learning how to do something amazing.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's a push pull there that in my mind, I think there still is a bypass, which is show people how awesome and difficult it is to develop their palate to really understand what amazing extraction tastes like for your business, for how you would like to do it, and show them that it's not as simple as pushing those buttons and letting it sit there. And that's not the whole picture, but then when I'm looking at trying to optimize a situation and create a connection, which is what we do as a company, like that would be where a place I would start. There's more to it. You absolutely dive deeper, but there's more to challenging the human being to utilize all of these tools and still be very intentional and creative and understanding of the product they're putting out. And I see that.
Yeah.
That is a little bit of an impasse and a struggle for sure.
My take on the whole thing, I think my overall assessment is we have a lot of different businesses with a lot of different goals, and we're lumping them under one umbrella, and they don't actually belong under the same umbrella.
That's a good point.
So if you rewound the clock to early third wave specialty, early 2000s, it was really clear what a third wave coffee shop was. There was certain identifiers of this new and up and coming specialty coffee trend.
Super clear.
Fast forward now, and you have a lot of cafes that kind of look the same, do some of the same things like latte art, grind to order, things that used to be like hallmarks of that cafe, but they actually have very different quality goals, and they're just very different business models, but they all kind of look like the quote unquote generic third wave cafe. And I don't think that they look the same in the surface, but they're not. And I don't think they belong in the same conversation. So I don't think that a grinder like this is going to be for everybody. But I think for people who want to make specialty coffee that's definitely better than the second wave 90s stuff, but they're actually not concerned with going all in and training baristas, that a lot of these automation tools are going to be great for them.
Sure.
Because they're going to be able to help cut training time from their employees. They probably have more turnover. Like the road to pretty good,
right?
And pretty good's already, better than what a lot of people were doing again in those second wave cafes. That's all they need to be.
Sure.
They need to be pretty good. And if these tools can help them be pretty good and they don't have the plan to engage any further, like great. automate freaking whatever you want,
Totally.
because a lot of them are trying to do it the old school way, like how we used to do it, beginning third wave, but without that intention and attention. They're actually worse. A lot of places are worse than they would be if they were going to automate more stuff.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. It takes so much more effort and intention to be good without the automation.
Right.
So much more. Like,
right.
Yeah, and it's impossible to even describe because at this point, probably 85% of our listeners, if not more, have never even experienced or seen what that's like.
And if you're not deeply engaged in the process, or if you're looking at specialty coffee as just like, oh, it's this fun thing to do, I have a cafe, but I'm not really all about it, like, this is probably better for you.
Yeah, man, it's interesting. Like,
but let's not confuse. Sorry, I keep interrupting you.
It's okay.
But let's not confuse that with the same thing as what we do.
No, I mean that's kind of where I'm thinking about shit. It's like you go back. Well, there's a couple things on my mind because I wish I had an ability to, and maybe anybody out there, maybe you could send some info our way if you know this. But Starbucks currently, like they have to have similar technology for what they do, right? I mean, the shit we're looking at, I don't know how it works. I know that coffee's getting ground. It probably has to be super precise, knowing they're that big of an establishment. You've got those group heads and that whole espresso machine situation. We'll watch it when we're over the hill. It's a really interesting thing, which is one part of what I'm thinking. But there's another whole part, and that is, like we are in a place now where people can look at what everybody's doing, right, and try their best to copy it. And that's kind of a normal thing in business. Like you should take concepts from other places and find ways to apply them to what you do and do your better version of the thing, right? And I think whether we like it or not, that's something that you take it back to Starbucks, like Howard Schultz did. He went overseas, he saw the espresso culture going crazy, and he's like, you know what, I could do this espresso culture in a way that America would love it. And then he went and figured it out. Whether you like it or love it or hate it, he was a huge pioneer for this espresso culture in America because he saw something, he copied it and improved upon it. And I think what's happening now is we're in that state where there's fewer of people looking to improve upon versus just copy and implement to make easier.
Well, I think the key...
you know what I'm saying?
I hear what you're saying, and I agree with most of it. I think the one distinction where I'd take it a little bit different is I don't know if he improved upon it. He just changed it.
Well, but I would call it improved upon in order to work with the people he's trying to reach.
Sure.
So I agree with you. Improved upon it based on individual perception, probably not. Like I would probably prefer the European style to his.
Right.
But
right. He's trying to hit it. He's trying to get into a certain market, and he thinks this is the way to fit the market.
Yeah, and he's like, "Oh, America's going to have a better version of coffee that's going to be a different version of that, and I know how to make it rain." You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally get that. And I think that's kind of where I'm at too, to where it's like that specialty coffee, that espresso culture is not the same as Italian espresso culture.
Not at all.
And I think we have that kind of a different kind of cultural divide now. There's a lot of little different cultural divides. I mean, it's weird, man. There's more generic companies than ever before because of what you're saying. It's really easy to see what's happening.
Right.
You don't even have to have you don't even have to have a fucking brain anymore. You're just like, okay, cool. This is cool. This is a trend. This is happening, and I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And then maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. It seems like the lifespan of most companies is pretty short when you start with that at your feet, it's damn, dude. You're not starting with love, you're not starting with passion. So when the steam runs out, you're not digging into the well of your soul to figure it out. You're just like, no, man, I thought this was just going to be cool shit to do. That's freaking different and weird. And yeah, it's weird. It's just really weird.
It is. I mean, for me, when I hear the concept of a grinder like that, and it's probably, for our company and where we're at in this moment, it's not time to probably integrate something like that for a bit and whatever. But I could see the ability to curate an experience with, man, I try to, it's impossible to compare, but when I get into these places where I'm like, oh, cool, the head chef of a place doesn't typically at some point like work in that place all the time, yet it's still their restaurant and it's still their menu and it's still their quality and it's still replicated, right? And then sometimes, again, I'm assuming a little bit, but I'm assuming that most of the people who work in those places are on a career path, and therefore it's easier to train, execute, and trust people to do a lot of technical shit, right? And then because of where specialty coffee is now, the majority of people who work in it and have always worked in it, with the exception of that small window where third wave was getting established, and I think a lot of people were trying to become career baristas, we're back to a place where, I guess to what you were saying with Colby's, it's like third wave. What was the term?
He called them third wave natives, which I thought was pretty brilliant.
Yeah. Because I mean, what that really feels like to me too is it's like, okay, this is the other version of the Starbucks barista. It's the I'm a barista and I do coffee and it's third wave style. Like it's not different here or there or here. Like this is just a style of coffee that I make, and if with that comes kind of a consistent. There's less of a need to engage on a super deep level because a lot of these people maybe don't see a long-term future in it. Very few do. And so I think it changes the approach.
I think you just don't instantaneously recognize it as something. It's not that you don't appreciate it. It's like you don't know how special it is because it's just your baseline frame of reference.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It would be like if you like fast forward 20 years and everyone is driving Teslas with 600 horsepower up to 1,000 horsepower. So when you're 17 years old and you get your first car, you jump into a car with like 800 horsepower. And you're like, this is how cars are. They have 800 horsepower.
Right, exactly.
And someone like us is like, no, cars have 160 horsepower and we drove like rust buckets and this thing is incredible. And they're like, yeah, but no, this is normal.
Like,
this
fine.
is just like our third car that my mom has.
Right.
Like, this is just what cars are. And it's just like, oh, cool. Your frame of reference is just like totally like cafes. Like, what do? Like they have coffee that comes from a certain place. And I know the name of the farmer. We pour latte art. We pull each espresso to order. Like, you know, we brew individual cups of coffee, all things that aren't mind blowing to anyone in the industry today. But if you rewind into that like late 90s, early 2000s, these were things that we were fighting for tooth and nail. It's like the first coffee shop. I showed Mark this at Meta, and it was awesome because they have some grinders that are doserless, and they have some grinders that have the clicky clackies.
Yeah, huge
and
fan.
I don't think he'd ever used a clicky clacky grinder.
Oh snap!
And he's struggling through this clicky clacky grinder, and you know, if you've never seen a traditional doser, it's this big chamber and it's got a star in the bottom and you pull this lever and coffee falls out. And I was like, do you know how this works? And do you know what this is for or like why it's designed like this? And he's like, no. And I'm like, so back in the day, you would turn the grinder on and fill up this whole chamber. Like this whole thing would be sitting full of ground coffee all day. And when you needed to make a shot, like 2 clicks for a double, 1 click for a single. So like the coffee that you were making was maybe ground hours ago. Who knows? And you know, you'd put the single into a single basket, double into a double basket. And he's like, holy shit. Like I had no idea.
Like, wow.
And
that was innovation at the time.
And it wasn't that long ago that there was a group of us who were saying, no. We don't have to use the doser the way it's designed for. We can grind espresso to order to get
every time
really, really fresh coffee. And no. We don't have to, you know, steam these big, huge bubbles. We can do this thing called microfoam and try to practice this latte art. And if you poured latte art back then, people's jaws would literally drop because no one had ever seen it before. And you were lucky if you lived somewhere near a cafe that actually poured that. So all these things and it's not like people are intentionally taking them for granted. They don't realize how new all of this stuff is. And I think it's just interesting. It's just really interesting framing.
Totally. I mean, you get a grinder like we're talking about, and honestly, offhand, what it feels like would be one of the best places for a grinder like that might be the semi mom and pop shop. Like if I was opening a shop and I really cared about the quality of the coffee, and I knew that I would be able to dial it in, but I knew I had to take care of business. I'd take to and I wanted to make sure that I could come in taste a coffee 3 times, 4 times a day and help my team adjust to it and like allow them to taste what amazing is while consistently showing and curating that the coffee is coming out exactly how I wanted. Like that to me seems like an amazing tool for something like that to save me energy and time. And then there's probably a million other ways you could look at it as well in terms of a big company potentially where it's like you have so many people that it's hard to consistently train and upgrade and keep a level there. And
the quality threshold will top out wherever your company quality tops out,
yeah, exactly.
right? So if we did put that on our bar,
right,
and it worked how it was supposed to work,
yeah,
we could get amazing results with it. It wouldn't take away from the artistry of what we're doing because we still physically have to dial in the coffee.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have to set the parameters, we have to roast it, we have to make sure it tastes the way it's supposed to taste. So even though it's adjusting the grind for you, it's not setting a flavor profile for you. It's not dialing in for you. So you can only go as high as like your skill level will let you, right?
And to me, that is cool.
It is cool. And automation's weird because right now we're at this place where it's like, what exactly is automation? And people are kind of figuring out where to draw the line because there's some people commenting like, fuck this takes away from my art. And nobody thinks about, we used to think that initially about something like a scale. It's like, why would you use a scale? Like that's taking away from, using a scale is taking away from what the barista is doing. I don't need to use a scale because I intuitively know. And while it is cool to know, it's pretty fun for me to be able to look at a shot and I'm like,
huge fan.
That's 38 grams out. Oh yeah. And then you double check it and it actually is 38 grams out. That's rad. I love that. That's fun. But I don't think the scale's taking away from the artistry of anything. It's fucking interesting.
Yeah. What is it? I hear you.
Because here's goods and bads of scale in espresso. So good, if you have everything dialed in and you're doing everything as you should be, you can get repeatable output that tastes generally delicious. Where the scale goes wrong is if you don't have everything dialed in, and let's say, you know, you're not paying attention to how much coffee's going in there, you're not getting a really even extraction, maybe you've got channels for one reason or another, you could have 2 espressos that are both 40 grams out that taste completely different, right? So the where it goes bad is when people think that they don't have to pay attention. You still have to pay attention. You just have a little more freedom. Whereas back in the day, we're watching the whole shot, basically, like, you know, we're
with every detail possible.
Maneuvering around. We're like, okay, what does it look like when it drops? All right, it's doing this
dripping,
behavior. Like, is it dripping? Is it flowing? Like, how long does it flow before? Is it wiggling a little bit?
When does it wiggle?
Wiggled a little too early, I might have a
in?
channel. But if it wiggles after like 20, I'm good. Like, you know what I mean? And it's like, how is the color changing? Is the color changing slow, steady, and easy, or is there a big break between like really dark brown
and something going on there?
Yeah, tan. So you're kind of forced to see it, and dude, I don't know.
Well, I mean, check out the other side.
I honestly don't even know what I'm trying to say. I'm just kind of like riffing on how things have changed, and it's like at some point people are going to be like, yeah, grinders just adjust themselves in the same way that we're like, yeah, we have scales in all the drip trays of our machines.
Well, I mean, there's also, you could kind of, again, we're talking, all of these things are about hyper precision, right? All of these new tools, right? Precision in a scale, precision in a grinder, precision in an input, precision in an output. And it's an evolution and a bit more of a focus on stuff that, for lack of a better term, had its own version of precision, right? Your clack, 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 if done the same way every single time, precisely dosed what it dosed with 1 click or precisely dosed with 2 clicks. The fact that we can go further is cool, but it's an evolution on that, right? So you could be the same consistency, assuming that your coffee is roasted the same exact way every time. And again, this is, you're gonna easily be able to poke a little bit of holes, but at the same time,
I like this. This is good.
It's roasted to this temperature every time, and it's about this dark every time, and this exact amount of, like, it's always a 16-minute roast that finishes at 4:05. That is this Brazilian coffee that is, you know what I'm saying? So you've got a pretty significant, consistent thing there. Then you can get it to this thing, which is the doser, and then only so much can fit in a portafilter. So you could say, hey, as long as I can tamp it down, and I'd like to see, for instance, I'd like to actually see the little screw in the top of the espresso.
Right.
You've got a measurement there. Then you've got a timer that you always kind of had. But even if you didn't, you have these espresso cups that can still be the same, that still have lines on them that you could still hit the same every single time, with your variables kind of being pretty controlled as long as you're technically tamping appropriately. You know what I'm saying? Like, just to get that shot of coffee, you could argue, and I would believe, because I've been there, yes, there's some tweaking in between that, but you could be pretty fucking consistent and put out an experience that tastes delicious doing that as well if you wanted to, and I probably would enjoy it in the right place. And so,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, it's not as accurate, but it's still, in my opinion, in the scheme of a lot of things, like it could be a pretty accurate system for the very most part, especially if you taste what you're tasting and you're like, that's how it's supposed to taste. And you
Right.
know, like, you've got these little windows that you can play with, which is not, it's not all that different to me in the context of, you know exactly what you know, and you become a professional at knowing what you know in that world, or you can become a professional in knowing the digital numbers and the little tiny windows that go with those numbers. And to me, they're kind of comparable, even though one of them you can't speak to as clearly and potentially like the whys behind it in the same way. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, you can still play the game and produce an amazing experience utilizing all that same shit.
Yeah, I think what I'm kind of picking up from what you're saying is there are multiple ways to get to where you want to go.
Yeah.
And where you want to go, or how high you want to go, or how deep you get into it, is more about you and your coffee culture than it is the tools available. So if you have a culture that is just kind of lackadaisical, you're not super engaged with what you're doing, maybe you can get a little bit more consistency out of an automated grinder.
Yeah.
But it's not going to give you great espresso if you're not paying attention and trying to make great espresso. And I think that's part of what Chris is saying. And there's a big danger in like thinking that it'll solve all your problems when you really have a deeper problem.
Yeah.
Because no matter how much, and again, I'm not like anti-automation or for automation, depending on what I'm looking for at the moment. So what we do at Cat and Cloud, I have a different perspective on than what I would do at home with my espresso machine. Like when I make espresso for me, I'm a process guy.
Yeah.
I just want to be in that process. So for me, it's fun to do a lot of it manually and watch the extraction and go by feel and not have to stick to a recipe and say, like, ooh, I'm going to try this out. And maybe I'm going to pull this a little shorter or longer today, just because there's something in my gut telling me like, this is
what I need
this
to
is
do
looking
today.
a certain way and
Yeah.
this is going to be good. And that's not what we're doing in the cafe for the most part. When you have something like the Answer, it's consistently roasted. It's got a pretty consistent recipe, good window. And your promise is different. I'm just exploring.
Yeah,
right?
no,
in
totally.
the cafe, we have a promise. That was a mini tangent, but there's different ways to approach different things. But I'm not. Oh yeah, what I was saying was I'm not anti or pro automation. I just think we need to be clear that making delicious things is more than just knowing the numbers and having the tools. Because if you gave me a fucking recipe book, a cookbook from a great chef, and I'm new, okay, here's all the ingredients. Here's all the bake times. Here's all the oven temperatures. Like, if you gave that same recipe to me and you and told us to make those things, yours is going to be better than mine. Because you spend more time in the kitchen, you just cook more than I do, and there's something about that that matters. You know what I mean? There's
Because you don't follow the recipe exactly. It's like Severus Snape, the Half-Blood Prince, in his little book with
Like,
Harry when they're trying to
smash
make the
it, don't
things. Yeah,
cut
he's like, and it's like all these little caveats to the actual recipe. And Hermione, the perfect student, is like, this is fucking not
this
working.
is not how it works.
And Harry's like, yeah, smash the thing, don't cut it. And says, it says cut it.
Yeah, it
And
specifically
you know what I'm saying? And
says
it's like,
cut.
that's what you learn when
But
you
even
engage.
even all things considered, like even if there's some sort of intangible thing that happens when you're in tune with what you're doing.
Right.
Like, and so that's the
shit's all living and breathing.
Right, exactly.
Whether it's automated or not.
And
And
I
that's
think-
where you are the human. You're the living, breathing thing. So is the thing you're interacting with. Even the machinery in its own way is living and breathing because it can adjust. So if you don't understand and engage and care about the quality of how all this stuff works together, you will get what you give.
Yeah, because automation is great, but we can't automate our passion for something. We can't automate our curiosity for something.
Yeah.
And that's where all the beautiful things happen when someone's engaging with that passion, when they're engaging with that curiosity, when they're so driven to say, I have to figure this out because I love it so much and I know that there's something special in here. And that's how I fell in love with espresso. That's how you fell in love with espresso.
Yeah.
And that I think is the pathway to greatness.
Hey everyone, that's the podcast for the week. Thanks so much for listening. If you heard something that inspired you, let us know, or tell a friend. These are the types of connections that are the most important to us and that we seek to create every day. If there's something you heard and you want to know more about, send us an email to podcast@catandcloud.com or head to our website, catandcloud.com/podcast, and let us know. While you're on our site, check out everything we have to offer. Dive deep into one of our single origin coffees or pick up a little treat for yourself. We have something for everyone, so check it out. Also, find us in the usual places, YouTube, Instagram. We're always there sharing amazing things. All right, that's it. Thanks everyone for being awesome. We'll be back next week.